The orbital station known as Accord Spire drifted in the black like a monument to compromise. All polished alloys and softly humming gravity rings, designed by a committee that had agreed only on what it must not resemble. No flags, no national colors, no architectural curves that could be interpreted as aggressive or flirtatious by anyone with antennae, frills, or a tragic history of interstellar misunderstandings. Owen had been here for 6 days, which was 5 days longer than any human should be required to remain polite without fresh air. The negotiations with the Karathi delegation had reached that dangerous phase where everyone was still smiling, but no one remembered why. Ambassador Lyseth sat across from him at the crescent table, her posture immaculate, her expression composed in the way only someone trained from childhood to represent an entire species could manage. At a glance, she looked human enough to lull the unprepared into dangerous assumptions. But the long, elegant ears sweeping back from her dark hair marked her as unmistakably Karathi. They were expressive in subtle ways Owen was still learning to read, tilting and angling with emotions she kept out of her face. At the moment they were held very still, which usually meant restraint rather than calm. The air between the delegations felt thick, as if the station's environmental systems had decided to experiment with emotional humidity. Trade corridors were being discussed for the third time that day, and the same sentence had been rephrased so often that it no longer sounded like language. Owen listened, nodded, made the appropriate diplomatic noises, and watched Lyseth's fingers rest on the table, perfectly still. She had not moved them in nearly 10 minutes. That worried him more than if she had slammed her palm down and demanded satisfaction under Karathi law. When the discussion stalled yet again, silence stretched, taut and uncomfortable. Owen felt it tug at his nerves. He was good at this job because he noticed people, because he cared, because he believed that most conflicts were misunderstandings wrapped in pride. Lyseth had been carrying the weight of these talks alone, absorbing suspicion from both sides with a grace that looked effortless and felt anything but. Without fully realizing he was doing it, Owen leaned slightly toward her and reached out, intending nothing more than reassurance, a quiet human signal that said, "You're not alone in this ridiculous room." His fingers closed gently around hers. The effect was immediate and absolute. Conversation died so fast it felt like the station had lost power. Across the table, a Karathi aide inhaled sharply. On the human side, someone dropped a stylus, and the sound echoed far too loudly. Lyseth turned her head slowly to look at Owen, her eyes searching his face with careful precision. Her ears angled forward, not aggressively, but with focused attention. "Ambassador Owen," she said evenly, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "Are you requesting a marital bond?" Owen's brain shut down in a dignified and complete manner. For a brief, peaceful second, there were no thoughts at all. Then they returned all at once, colliding in a panicked mess. He became acutely aware of the fact that he was holding an alien ambassador's hand in front of 2 delegations, a dozen observers, and at least 3 recording drones that never forgot anything. He released her instantly, as if her skin had become radioactive. What? No," he said, then immediately realized that this was not an adequate response to a question that had just been asked with terrifying sincerity. I didn't mean, this is a human thing. Sometimes, not the marriage part, the hand part, for comfort, which sounds worse now that I'm saying it out loud." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Lyseth did not look offended. If anything, she looked intrigued, which somehow made it worse. She glanced briefly at her aides, then back to Owen. "Among the Kirathi," she said, patient as if explaining gravity to a child, "hand-holding in a formal setting constitutes a declaration of pursuit. It is not performed casually. It is not performed accidentally." Owen managed a weak laugh, the kind that escaped when the alternative was screaming. "I assure you, Ambassador, my people are very capable of accidental gestures. Entire wars have started over less." That earned him a few confused looks and one reluctant snort from a junior human analyst who immediately tried to disguise it as a cough. Lyseth's ears flicked, a movement Owen was beginning to recognize as amusement restrained by dignity. "The issue," she continued, "is not whether you intended the gesture. The issue is how it will be interpreted. You have either proposed marriage to me in front of witnesses, or you have demonstrated a profound ignorance of Karathi custom. Owen swallowed. I'm hoping for a third option involving a time machine. Silence again, then unexpectedly, Lyseth exhaled something that might have been a laugh. It was soft, controlled, but unmistakably real. The tension in the room shifted, not vanishing, but changing shape. There may be another option, she said after a moment. For the duration of these negotiations, it may be advantageous to allow the assumption to stand. Owen stared at her. You want us to pretend I meant it? Yes. Pretend, he repeated, just to be sure he was hearing this correctly. Correct. He glanced around the room. Every eye was on them now, curious, calculating. Somewhere, a political analyst was probably already rewriting projections. Owen rubbed his face with one hand. Ambassador Lyseth, he said carefully, with all due respect, this is possibly the worst plan I have ever heard. Her lips curved, just slightly. Then you agree it is an excellent diplomatic solution. Against his better judgment, and possibly his future sanity, Owen found himself nodding. Owen learned very quickly that pretending to be engaged to an alien ambassador was not a passive activity. It required forms. The moment the session recessed, both delegations erupted into controlled chaos, which was diplomacy's polite way of panicking quietly. Karathi aides clustered around Lyseth, their long coats shimmering with embedded data filaments, speaking in rapid, precise bursts. Human staffers did the same to Owen, except with less elegance and more whisper shouting. Someone tried to hand him a tablet labeled Interspecies Relational Protocol. Provisional, which he refused on principle, mostly because he was afraid it might start vibrating. Lyseth stood at the center of it all, calm as orbital night, her long ears angled slightly back as if filtering out unnecessary frequencies. When she finally raised a hand, the room obeyed her immediately. Owen noticed this with a mix of admiration and concern. Humans tended to obey out of habit or fear. Karathi apparently obeyed because it made sense. We will reconvene in 1 hour, she announced. Ambassador Owen and I will confer privately. That last part caused a visible ripple. Owen opened his mouth to object, then remembered that objecting to your fiancé in public probably sent the wrong signal and snapped it shut again. He nodded instead, hoping it looked intentional. They were escorted to a smaller chamber overlooking the station's inner ring, where ships drifted past like slow thoughts. The door sealed behind them with a soft hiss, leaving an unfamiliar silence. Owen exhaled, long and shaky. I want to be very clear, he said immediately. I did not propose to you. I barely proposed to restaurants. Lyseth turned to face him fully. In the quieter light, he noticed fine details he had missed before. The faint iridescence in her eyes, the way her ears moved independently, adjusting as if listening to more than sound. She studied him with open curiosity, not offense. I understand, she said. Your explanation was energetic. That's one word for it. She folded her hands behind her back. However, intent is not the sole factor in Karathi law. Context and witnesses carry equal weight. At this moment, both delegations believe you have initiated a bond. Owen rubbed his temples. So I accidentally triggered alien engagement law by being nice. Yes, that tracks. That absolutely tracks with my career. There was a pause, then Lyseth's lips twitched. For what it is worth, this is not the most unusual proposal I have received. He blinked. I'm sorry, most? Karathi ambassadors attract attention. One attempt involved ceremonial combat, another involved poetry translated by an unreliable algorithm. Owen winced. That's brutal. It rhymed, she added gravely, incorrectly. Despite himself, Owen laughed. The sound surprised him. The panic hadn't vanished, but it had loosened, just enough to breathe around. Lyseth seemed to notice, her posture easing by a fraction. The reason I suggested maintaining the appearance, she continued, is efficiency. If I reject you publicly, it implies either insult or distrust. If you retract, it implies deception. Both outcomes complicate negotiations. And pretending we're engaged doesn't? Less so, she said. Engagement suggests investment, mutual concern, a shared future, however theoretical. Diplomats respond favorably to narratives. Owen considered that. So we're a narrative. For now. He looked out at the drifting ships. How long is for now? Until the agreements are finalized. 3 days, possibly 4. I've had root canals that lasted longer, he muttered. Lyseth tilted her head. What is a root canal? Never mind. It's a human horror story. She accepted that without question, which somehow made it funnier. Then her expression grew more serious. There are expectations, she said. Public proximity, coordinated movement, light physical contact, though not excessive. Karathi courtship values restraint. Owen raised an eyebrow. That's a relief. Humans are very bad at restraint. I have observed, she said dryly. He glanced at her ears. Do I need to do anything special with those? I mean, culturally. Do not touch them, she said immediately. Noted, emphatically noted. Eye contact is acceptable. Humor is acceptable. Declarations of devotion are not required. Good, he said. I left my declarations at home. Another pause settled, this one less awkward. Lyseth looked at him, really looked, as if reassessing data she had previously dismissed. You reached for my hand, she said quietly. Why? Owen hesitated. Honesty was dangerous in negotiations, but something about the way she asked made evasion feel worse. You look like you were carrying the room alone, he said, and I know what that feels like. Her ears angled forward slightly. She did not respond right away. Then, she said at last, your gesture was not meaningless, merely misdirected. I'm very good at that. A soft chime sounded, indicating incoming updates. Lyseth straightened, composure returning like armor. She extended her hand toward him again, deliberately this time, palm open. For appearances, she said. Owen stared at it, then at her face. Just so we're clear, he said, taking it gently. This one's intentional. Yes, she replied. The door opened moments later, aides flooding back in, cameras activating, assumptions crystallizing. To anyone watching, the human and the Karathi ambassador stood side by side, hands linked, calm and aligned. Inside, Owen thought distantly that the universe had a strange sense of humor, and he suspected it wasn't done with him yet. By the third day, Owen had learned 2 important truths about being fictitiously engaged to a Karathi ambassador. First, everyone noticed everything. Second, no one ever asked the same question twice, because they asked it in 17 subtly different ways. The station's central promenade had been rerouted for security and optics, which was diplomatic shorthand for let them be seen. Owen and Lyseth walked side by side beneath a slow arc of artificial sky, stars projected with mathematical indifference. Every few meters, someone bowed, nodded, recorded, or pretended not to stare while staring very hard. Owen smiled until his cheeks hurt. Lyseth did not smile at all, which somehow made the spectacle feel more official. Your facial muscles are twitching, she said quietly without looking at him. I'm expressing joy, Owen replied. It's a human mating signal. That is untrue. Mostly. They slowed as a delegation of neutral observers passed, their translucent bodies shimmering faintly with bioluminescent pulses. One of them paused, its surface rippling in polite interest. Your alliance appears statistically promising, it said in a voice like harmonized glass. May your bond optimize outcomes. Thank you, Owen said automatically. Lyseth inclined her head. We will endeavor to optimize responsibly. The being drifted away. Owen waited until it was gone. Do you ever get the feeling the universe is running experiments on us? Yes, Lyseth said, often without consent. They resumed walking. For appearances, Lyseth's hand rested lightly on his forearm, a position she had explained was Karathi neutral, intimate enough to suggest connection, restrained enough to avoid escalation. Owen was hyper-aware of the contact, not because it felt forbidden, but because it felt surprisingly natural, which worried him more. In the negotiation chamber, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Where suspicion once lingered, curiosity now bloomed. Trade representatives smiled more readily. Military advisors spoke more softly. Someone had even brought refreshments from a joint human Karathi supplier, which Owen suspected was less coincidence and more symbolic overkill. As discussions resumed, Lyseth leaned toward him slightly, close enough that only he could hear her. You will need to nod here, she murmured. Why? Because Counselor Brain expects affirmation from both partners. I don't know what he just said. He does not either, she replied. Nod. Owen nodded solemnly. Counselor Brain looked pleased. Somewhere a treaty clause probably shifted in their favor. Owen made a mental note to nod more often. During a break, they retreated to a side alcove designed for private consultation, its walls softly glowing with adaptive privacy fields. Owen collapsed into a chair, loosening his collar. I don't know how you do this every day, he said. If I had to represent Earth permanently, I'd fake my own abduction. Lyseth considered that. Humans fake many things. Occupational hazard. She sat across from him, posture perfect even at rest. For a moment neither spoke. The quiet felt different now, not tense, but inhabited. You asked earlier about Karathi courtship, she said. There is something you should understand. Owen straightened. Owen contributed a human exhibit at the last minute, hastily selecting a compilation of Earth music across centuries. The system, lacking context, shuffled it randomly. The result was catastrophic and somehow perfect. A Karathi elegy faded seamlessly into 20th century pop, followed by something involving electric guitars and yelling. Owen winced. This is not representative, he said quickly. Lyseth listened, head tilted. It is. Diverse. That's one way to put it. As observers filtered through, questions followed. About compatibility, about symbolism, about whether human music was always this emotionally volatile. Owen deflected with humor. Lyseth answered with precision. Together they formed a strange balance. His improvisation smoothing her exactness, her clarity grounding his chaos. At one point, a Karathi elder approached, her ears adorned with ceremonial bands. She regarded Owen with open curiosity. You did not pursue a bond through strategy, the elder said. Why? Owen hesitated, then shrugged. I wasn't trying to pursue anything. I just didn't want her to feel alone. The elder studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Irrational, she said. Potentially significant. Lyseth looked at him, something unreadable passing across her expression. Later, during a lull, they found themselves alone again, standing near the viewport. The stars beyond seemed closer here, sharper, as if listening. This arrangement, Lyseth said quietly, has altered the negotiations more than anticipated. In a good way? In an effective way. High praise coming from you. She considered him. You adapt quickly. You listen. You do not attempt to dominate unfamiliar systems. I've learned that usually ends badly. Her ears angled forward slightly. You would be considered an unusual Karathi. I'm flattered, he said. I think. A pause followed. Not awkward. Not tense. Just present. When this concludes, Owen said carefully, we won't have to keep pretending. No, she agreed. And that's fine. Yes. They stood there watching a ship jump into fold space, light bending around it like a held breath. Owen felt something tighten in his chest. Not fear, not panic, but anticipation tinged with loss. Lyseth shifted closer, her shoulder brushing his. The contact was brief, almost accidental. Almost. For appearances, she said. Right, he replied. But neither of them moved away. The station hummed around them, ancient and patient, as if it had seen countless versions of this moment before. Species colliding, cultures overlapping, mistakes turning into possibilities. Owen wondered, not for the first time, whether the universe was laughing, and whether, just maybe, it was laughing kindly. The realization that the end was approaching arrived quietly, without ceremony, sometime between a successful vote on shared navigation beacons and a discussion about whose legal framework would apply if a human ship accidentally offended a Karathi moon. Owen noticed it when the agenda screen displayed only 2 remaining sessions. 2. The word sat there, small and harmless, and somehow heavier than any crisis they had survived so far. Lyseth noticed his distraction immediately. You are thinking loudly, she said as they walked toward the chamber. I'm practicing for retirement, he replied. Apparently my thoughts have decided to unionize. She accepted this with a slight tilt of her ears. Your people often respond to uncertainty with humor. We respond to everything with humor. It's either that or panic. Panic is inefficient. Humor is cheaper. Inside the chamber, the mood was almost celebratory. Agreements were aligning. Delegates spoke with the relaxed confidence of people who could already picture the press releases. Someone from the human side brought out a ceremonial data crystal. Someone from the Karathi side brought out an even more ceremonial data crystal, which glowed faintly and hummed in a way that suggested it had opinions. As the session progressed, Owen found himself doing less and observing more. Lyseth guided the conversation with subtle precision, her words carefully calibrated, her timing impeccable. He realized that he had grown accustomed to her presence in a way that went beyond professional partnership. He knew when she was about to object before she spoke. He could read the smallest shift in her posture, the slightest angle of her ears. This was new and alarming. During a recess, they retreated to a quiet corridor lined with transparent panels, beyond which the station's inner mechanisms rotated slowly, vast and delicate. Owen leaned against the wall. "So," he said lightly, "have you given any thought to how we're supposed to stop?" Lyseth looked at him. "Stop what?" "This," he gestured vaguely between them. "Us. The engagement. The narrative." "Yes," she said. "I have considered it. And there are several acceptable methods. A mutual declaration of misalignment. I'm listening. Actively. Possibly fearfully. Karathi bonds are rare among diplomats," she continued. "Our culture values collective stability over personal attachment. To pursue a bond while in service is considered inefficient." "Romance is a scheduling problem," he said. "Essentially," he smiled. "Humans would be terrible Karathi." "You are already terrible Karathi," she said, not unkindly. Another silence settled. This one stretched, but neither rushed to fill it. Owen found himself studying her ears, the way they angled and adjusted, expressive despite her restraint. "Can I ask something potentially inappropriate?" he said. She glanced at him. "You have already asked several." "Fair. Does this," he gestured vaguely between them, "cause you trouble? Back home?" Lyseth's gaze shifted, not away but inward. "Some will question my judgment. Others will question my loyalty. A few will assume ambition. And you?" "I am curious," she said after a moment. "That is rare enough to be worth scrutiny." Owen let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "For what it's worth, I'm not ambitious enough to plan interstellar marriage as a strategy." "I know," she said. "You are far too transparent." "Rude." "Accurate." A chime interrupted them. Time to return. As they stood, Lyseth hesitated, then adjusted his collar with a precise, practiced motion. The gesture was small, intimate, and entirely unnecessary. Owen froze. "For appearances," she said, though her tone suggested something less certain. "Right," he said. "Appearances." Back in the chamber, the negotiations flowed more smoothly than before. Agreements aligned, objections softened. Owen contributed when needed, but mostly he observed, watching Lyseth command the room with quiet authority. He realized, not for the first time, that she was brilliant. Not just intellectually, but emotionally, navigating layers of expectation with grace. When the session finally adjourned, applause rippled through the chamber. Lyseth turned to him, her hand finding his again without hesitation this time. "You performed adequately," she said. "I live for high praise." As they walked out together, Owen caught his reflection in the polished wall panels. A human diplomat, hand in hand with an alien ambassador, both pretending and not pretending at the same time. The line between performance and reality was blurring, and he wasn't sure anymore which side he hoped it would fall on. The fourth day began with a misunderstanding involving breakfast, and nearly ended in a minor diplomatic incident over soup. Owen learned this while standing in the station's shared dining ring, staring at a shallow bowl of gently steaming liquid that appeared to contain glowing threads, several floating spheres, and something that pulsed in what he sincerely hoped was a friendly way. Lyseth stood beside him, perfectly composed, her tray identical except for the fact that her portion had arranged itself into a symmetrical pattern, as if respecting her authority. "This is food," Owen said carefully. "Yes." It's watching me. It is reacting to temperature changes. It blinked. Lyseth's ears tilted in what he had come to recognize as restrained amusement. Karathi cuisine incorporates adaptive proteins. They are nutritious and responsive. Of course they are, he said. Human food mostly just sits there and regrets its life choices. She picked up one of the glowing spheres and placed it delicately into her soup. It dissolved instantly. Owen flinched. You are overthinking this, she said. That's my core competency. They took a table near the viewport, the curve of the station framing a slow drift of cargo ships and patrol vessels beyond. Around them, delegates ate, watched, and pretended not to listen. Owen took a cautious sip of the soup. It tasted fine, mild, comforting even. He blinked. Okay, he admitted. That's better than expected. Lyseth nodded. Cultural prejudice is common. I prefer the term defensive skepticism. As they ate, conversation drifted away from negotiations and into unfamiliar territory. Lyseth spoke of her homeworld seas, vast and dark, where cities clung to pressure-stabilized shelves and light came from engineered plankton rather than stars. Owen told her about Earth's oceans, about beaches crowded with tourists and trash, about storms named like people who caused trouble and then left. Our storms are named for mathematical sequences, she said. That sounds less personal. It is more efficient. After breakfast, they were summoned, not to the negotiation chamber, but to a cultural observatory, a space where representatives were encouraged to display aspects of their worlds. The idea, Owen suspected, was to remind everyone what they were negotiating for, not just about. Lyseth had prepared a Karathi projection, a living map of her world's continental drift over millennia, tectonic plates sliding with slow inevitability. A formal acknowledgement of fulfilled purpose, a ceremonial withdrawal. He blinked. You have a ceremonial breakup? We have ceremonies for most transitions. Of course you do. She studied him. You find this amusing. I find it terrifying, he said. Humor is my coping mechanism. A faint smile touched her lips. I have noticed. They stood there for a moment, the hum of the station filling the space between them. When this ends, Owen said carefully, what happens to you? Lyseth's gaze shifted outward, toward the rotating structures. I return home. I will be reassigned. My superiors will analyze the outcome. And the engagement? It will be recorded as a strategic anomaly. Romantic, he muttered. She glanced at him. And you? I go back to Earth, file reports, answer uncomfortable questions, avoid touching anyone's hands for the rest of my career. That earned him a quiet sound that might have been laughter. Later that cycle, they were invited, strongly encouraged, to attend a joint cultural reception. The hall was filled with light and sound, holographic displays hovering above mingling delegates. Music played, mercifully curated this time. Owen found himself holding a drink that changed color depending on ambient emotion, which meant it kept flickering between hopeful blue and anxious yellow. Lyseth observed it. Your beverage appears conflicted. It's empathic, he said. I feel seen. As they moved through the crowd, conversations followed them like gravitational fields. Compliments, questions, assumptions. Owen answered with practiced ease, but he felt the strain now, the constant awareness that this was temporary, that whatever this was, real or performed, had an expiration date. At one point, Lyseth was called away by a Karathi official. Owen watched her go, surprised by the immediate sense of absence. He sipped his drink. It turned a concerned shade of green. You look like a man contemplating a poor life choice, said a familiar voice. He turned to find one of the neutral observers, its translucent form pulsing gently. I prefer to think of it as a rich tapestry of questionable decisions. Your bond probability has increased, it said. Don't say that. Data does not respond to requests. Lyseth returned, her expression composed but her eyes searching for him. When she found him, something eased. Everything all right? He asked. Yeah, she said. They wish to discuss post-negotiation optics. Ah, the glamorous part. She hesitated, then said quietly, they assume the bond will dissolve. And you didn't correct them. No. They moved to the edge of the hall, where the light dimmed and the noise softened. For a moment, neither spoke. I meant what I said, Owen finally murmured, about not planning this. I know. But I also meant what I didn't say, he added, which is apparently more complicated. Lyseth regarded him, her ears angling forward slightly. Karathi do not often allow instinct to override structure. Humans do it all the time, he said, usually regretfully. She considered that. Perhaps that is why your species advances in unpredictable ways. Or why we trip over our own feet. A small smile appeared, then faded. The negotiations will conclude tomorrow, she said. I know. And then, she paused, we will no longer be required to pretend. The word pretend settled between them, heavier than before. Lyseth, Owen said softly, if this were different. She raised a hand, gently interrupting. Do not answer yet. He stopped. Some questions, she said, should not be asked until one is prepared to hear the answer. They stood there surrounded by alien light and human uncertainty, the station turning slowly around them. Owen's drink shifted to a deep, steady blue. For the first time since this began, he wasn't sure whether he wanted it to change. The final negotiation day arrived disguised as routine, which Owen suspected was the universe's way of being polite before doing something irreversible. A cord spire had shifted into its ceremonial configuration overnight. Gravity stabilized to a universally comfortable standard. Lighting softened to a neutral spectrum, proven not to induce anxiety in species with compound eyes. And the station's AI had selected a background hum statistically associated with optimism. Owen noticed all of this while adjusting his jacket for the third time, which was odd because the jacket fit just fine. His nerves did not. Lyseth stood beside him at the entrance to the chamber, composed as ever. Her attire was formal, Karathi diplomatic wear, layered fabric threaded with faintly glowing filaments that shifted color with her movement. Owen had been told discreetly that the pattern indicated seriousness without hostility. He appreciated that she had not chosen the pattern that indicated prepare for consequences. You are breathing irregularly, she said. I'm emotionally ventilating. That is not a recognized biological process. It should be. They entered together, and the room responded. Conversations paused. Heads turned. The story everyone believed, had been believing for days now, walked in holding hands. Owen felt the familiar weight of eyes and expectations. But something about today made it different. Final. Like the last page of a book you weren't ready to finish. The session unfolded with almost suspicious smoothness. Objections were raised and resolved with elegant efficiency. Compromises were accepted. At one point, a trade clause that had stalled talks for months across back channels was resolved in under 3 minutes, prompting Owen to wonder if pretending to be engaged should become standard diplomatic practice. Lyseth guided the closing statements with precise clarity, her voice calm, resonant, carrying authority without force. Owen contributed when needed, but mostly he watched her, acutely aware that he might never see her like this again. Fully in her element, commanding the room not by dominance, but by competence so undeniable it discouraged challenge. When the final agreement was ratified, the chamber erupted into applause. It rolled through the space, echoing softly against curved walls, amplified by the station's acoustics. Recording drones hovered closer, capturing the moment from every angle. A historic success, a triumph of cooperation. Owen clapped along with everyone else, smiling automatically. Inside, something twisted. Afterward came the formalities, signatures rendered in light and symbol, ceremonial data exchanges, the ritual acknowledgement of mutual trust. Lyseth and Owen were guided to the center for the final image, the symbolic representation of unity that would be transmitted across networks by the end of the cycle. As the image was captured, Lyseth leaned toward him slightly. After this, she said quietly, we will be expected to clarify our status. He swallowed. Of course. There is a private observatory reserved for us, she added. It would be appropriate. Appropriate, he echoed. The observatory was small, designed for contemplation rather than spectacle. One curved wall was entirely transparent, opening onto a view of open space unmarred by projections. Stars burned cold and honest beyond the glass. The door sealed behind them, leaving only the low hum of life support systems and the distant whisper of cosmic radiation. For a moment, neither spoke. "This is the part," Owen said finally, "where we stop pretending." "Yes." He nodded, then laughed softly, a sound halfway between humor and disbelief. "I'm terrible at endings." "Karathi endings are rarely dramatic," Lyseth said. "They are deliberate." She turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable but intent. "By tradition, we must now state whether the bond will proceed or dissolve. And if we dissolve," he said, "it's clean? Yes, respectful, private. And if we don't?" Her ears angled forward, just slightly. "Then the bond becomes real." Owen stared at the stars, then back at her. "I keep thinking about that first moment," he said. "How stupid it was. How unprepared I was. And how honest," she finished. He smiled faintly. "That too." She stepped closer, not touching him, but close enough that he could feel her presence, steady and warm. "Karathi do not believe in accidental truth," she said. "We believe intent reveals itself when structure fails." "That explains a lot about today," he said. "And about me." There was a pause. Long, not uncomfortable, waited. "I was prepared," Lyseth said slowly, "to dissolve the bond. It would have been correct. And now?" "And now," she said, "I find myself hesitating." Owen exhaled. "Good, because if you'd said that too confidently, I might have panicked." "That would have been inefficient," she said, almost smiling. He looked at her then, really looked, taking in the details he had learned to notice. The subtle shifts of her ears, the way her eyes reflected starlight, the composure that hid curiosity rather than suppressing it. "I don't know what this means," he said honestly, "for our worlds, for our careers, for whatever comes next." "Nor do I," she replied. "But uncertainty is not absence of value." He nodded. "Spoken like a diplomat." "Spoken like a Karathi who has observed humans," she countered. They stood there suspended between endings and beginnings, the universe stretching endlessly beyond the glass. Somewhere, a chord spire continued its patient orbit, unaware that two individuals inside it were quietly defying statistical expectations. Lyseth extended her hand toward him, not ceremonially this time, but openly. "This," she said, "is the moment of choice." Owen took her hand, slowly, deliberately. The contact felt different now. Grounded, intentional, real. "No misunderstandings," he said softly. "None," she agreed. Outside, a distant star flared, light reaching them long after the moment that created it had passed. Inside, for the first time since this began, Owen was certain of what he was doing. And strangely enough, that certainty did not feel like an ending at all. The station did not announce their decision. A chord spire had no protocol for moments that were neither treaties nor disasters, and so it continued its slow rotation, indifferent and patient, while two people stood in a quiet observatory and altered the future in a way no agenda had predicted. By the time the door opened again, the universe had already adjusted. The clarification, when it came, was mercifully brief. Lyseth delivered it to her delegation with the same calm authority she had used throughout the negotiations, framing the continuation of the bond as a lawful progression rather than a romantic upheaval. Karathi elders listened, asked precise questions, and recalculated. Some approved, some frowned. None objected outright. Owen's report to Earth was longer, messier, and included a footnote he suspected would be studied for years by committees who hated surprises but loved results. The agreements held. Trade corridors opened. Navigation beacons aligned. The accidental engagement, now a deliberate one, was cited in more than one analysis as a stabilizing factor. Owen pretended not to notice how often the phrase human emotional unpredictability appeared alongside strategic advantage. There were ceremonies, though fewer than Owen feared. Karathi customs favored meaning over spectacle, and Lyseth had negotiated even that, sparing him anything involving ceremonial combat or poetry. There was, however, a formal acknowledgement of intent conducted beneath a lattice of projected starlight, where both parties affirmed endurance, cooperation, and shared responsibility. Owen was relieved to discover that this did not require memorized vows, only honesty. Afterward, as delegates departed and the station gradually emptied, a chord spire returned to its quieter rhythms. Ships undocked, lights dimmed. The background hum shifted from optimism to neutrality, which Owen found oddly reassuring. They walked the promenade one last time before departure, the artificial sky arching overhead. This time there were fewer stairs, fewer assumptions. Most of the universe had already moved on to the next problem. "I will be reassigned," Lyseth said as they paused near the viewport. "Not removed, not elevated, simply adjusted." "That sounds like a win," Owen said. "For a Karathi," she agreed. "And me?" "You will be questioned extensively," he sighed. "Also familiar." She studied him. "You do not regret this." He considered the question carefully. Once he would have filled the silence with humor. Now he let it exist. "No," he said. "I regret that I didn't know enough to do it on purpose." Her ears angled forward, a gesture he had learned meant warmth. Ignorance does not negate instinct. They watched a freighter slip into fold space, its departure bending light into a brief, impossible curve. "When I first reached for your hand," Owen said, "I thought I was just trying to help someone get through a bad moment. And now? And now I think," he said, smiling slightly, "that I was helping myself without realizing it." Lyseth regarded him with thoughtful intensity. "You have changed." "Let me guess," he said. "More efficient?" "No," she replied. "More deliberate." That surprised him. He had always thought of himself as reactive, improvisational, a man who stumbled forward and hoped for the best. But now he saw the difference. He still joked, still deflected, still reached before thinking. The difference was that he no longer ran from the weight of what followed. They departed a chord spire together, not as a diplomatic necessity, but as a choice. Their ship, a joint-design courier, retrofitted with both human interfaces and Karathi environmental systems, was efficient, compact, and mildly opinionated. The onboard AI greeted them with a pause long enough to be rude. "Relationship parameters updated," it announced. "Probability of long-term success recalculated." Owen groaned. "I forgot ships do that now." Lyseth tilted her head. "What is the probability?" "Statistically improbable," the AI replied. "Emotionally consistent." Owen laughed. Lyseth did not object. Their destination was undecided, and that strangely felt right. There would be worlds to visit, cultures to navigate, misunderstandings to survive. There would be moments of frustration and silence and adaptation. They would argue about efficiency and instinct, about humor and restraint, about soup that blinked, but they would do so openly. As the ship slipped into fold space, stars stretching into luminous threads, Owen felt a quiet sense of alignment, not with destiny or fate, or any grand narrative the universe might prefer, but with himself. He had not planned this. He had not controlled it. He had learned instead to stay present long enough to recognize meaning when it reached back. Lyseth stood beside him, steady and composed, her long ears catching the hum of a future neither of them could fully predict. For once, Owen did not feel the need to joke. The universe, vast and indifferent, carried them forward anyway.